I'll come back to the Minister in a minute. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in France. And why is France different? Is it just different culturally because this is the way you are and you are less culturally sensitive to ethnic minorities?
Maybe, but I feel the channel is really wide now. Why is it different? Because we are very careful of the health of little children. And we have asked doctors to show the parents, well, the mothers, who would come to the family centers, how a little girl is made. How are the sexual parts and the use that the girl will have for this. They do it naturally for the boys. They check the 3 pieces, you know, little thing.
To make sure it's all there.
Make sure. Every time,
and they
systematically.
But for girls, I mean, do you think it's an education problem? Because you also have a big stick. I mean, people can go to prison, as we've seen for this.
Because it's the doctor's duty to inform the authorities, meaning the prosecutor, if he notices that the child has been hurt in any way, beaten black and blue, broken arm, sexually abused, sexually mutilated.
And do parents ever object and say, no, we don't want our children to be examined?
No, of course not.
They don't?
And they couldn't. I mean, it's for the child's sake.
Lynn Featherstone, couldn't we do that here?
I don't think that would be acceptable here. I think it's incredibly intrusive. I would not want my daughter examined annually before the age of 6. I would not want her examined every time she came back from abroad to be examined, her genitalia to be examined. However, we are following, as we saw in the film, we're following the Dutch route with an equivalent to the Dutch health passport, which we'll be trialling later this year, which actually does pretty much what you saw in the film and actually gives them a sort of a piece of paper when they go to countries to be mutilated, which says this is illegal, you are breaking the law, even if it's done in another country, it breaks the law here.
Here as well. That's
well,
part
I
of the
was
problem.
very interested in your film. I haven't heard about this tourism, if you like, for mutilation before your film tonight, and I would very much like anyone who knows people coming to this country, for goodness sake, inform us. We do not have this information.
I'll come back to Omar in a minute. I just wondered on that point about examinations and you know, because you said, Amina, about who do you tell, could you talk to a teacher and so on. I mean, would you or anybody you know object to those kind of things, or would it be okay if it was done at a school with a doctor like the one sitting next to you? Would you object?
Well, I don't understand why anyone would object, because when you're older, you're going to be looked at anyways. You're going to have the smear test done. So what's the problem having it done when you're younger, just being looked at? It's not like you're being sexually abused or anything. You're just making sure that everything's fine and there's no complications and there's nothing wrong with you. It's like it's helping you for the long run. So I don't understand why there's an objection to having someone examine you, especially when it's a qualified doctor.
Yeah, and presumably, yeah, exactly, providing it's a qualified doctor.
Yes.
So, I mean, again, what do you think about it, Muna?
I think it's, you know, when you're examining a child, you're thinking about their safety, not the fact that, oh yes, this is too cultural sensitivity and all that. You know, this is a child's life at risk. And about the prosecutions, you know, the Sunday Times did a quick investigation and they quickly found about 4 people who are willing to mutilate girls. Police officers could have done that very easily. The government could have helped them. They haven't.
But do you accept? I mean, you're putting everything on the government, and I'll come back to the Minister in a second. But there's obviously a responsibility in the community, and it might demand some girls your age or younger having to testify about their parents, about somebody who does this to them, about their grandparents and so on, and that's really difficult.
But the thing is, the government are not helping these girls. The community are the perpetrators. With any other form of abuse, the community wouldn't have been asked, oh yeah, you have to deal with the subject. But when it comes to FGM, the community have to deal with it, and that's completely wrong. This is a form of abuse.
Omar, you wanted to come in. I'll come back to the Minister.
Just wanted to make the point that I think it's important to recognise when the doctor, for example, says we're picking up increasing numbers of women coming to clinics, that's actually a good thing. That shows that the NHS, the system's actually working, it's picking these issues up. And it also tells you something about the statistics, and when you ask where is this statistical rise coming from, what you're actually seeing is today the younger generation, those who had undergone FGM back in Somalia, who are now of you know, reaching their 20s and 30s, who are now facing these complications, who are now increasingly turning to the NHS. And I think some of the points that Lynn made about the work the government's doing, the government has done a lot of work, and I think probably testament to the efforts of the Baroness, but the CPS have very rigorous guidelines to their prosecutors in terms of spotting FGM and how to tackle it.
Well, the guidelines have been so rigorous they haven't spotted a single one. I mean, that's what seems so bizarre, isn't it? And the French prosecutors, who also have rigorous guidelines, have managed to spot 100.
But with respect, I mean, if we take the approach, that, you know, the idea that you could, you know, and I'm totally with Lynn on this, the idea that you would somehow forcibly, you know, there's no issue of choice here. Take children randomly whom you are identifying by their race. We will not say that, we'll say we'll identify them by virtue of their risk factors. We're talking about by their race, and we will subject them to...
Yeah, but it's not forcible, is it?
No, not at all.
People can object if they want.
They could, but why should they? Because, you know, the doctor is there to take care of the child.
But do you accept? Sorry, but do you accept there is a degree of profiling? In other words, you're not saying it to Polish immigrants or Chinese immigrants. You're looking at certain ethnic groups.
No, not at all. We're asking the doctors to examine any child, because, you know, they all deserve the same service.
It has to be every child.
Of course.
Certainly, there aren't going to be so many going to that particular part of the world under a certain age, but obviously you cannot select children according to race. That can't be. But it can be children, as you were saying, Chinese, whatever it is, all children.
But Minister, you heard some of the girls saying it's their personal views. They wouldn't have a problem with it. They don't see why anybody would have a problem with it.
Well, I think the bigger issue in the prosecution sense is it's very, very difficult to get girls to come forward to give evidence. There's been training for prosecutors. We're actually having a year's worth of referrals that didn't get to court analysed to see why they've fallen down. With great respect,
Minister, people used to say this about rape. You know, there's a difficulty about getting people to come forward. Well, what's the difficulty if it's a matter for the authorities? Well,
as I said, I'm holding this meeting in October with police and health authorities to see how we can move forward on this. But you know, prosecution, we prosecute rape and we prosecute theft, and it hasn't stopped rape or theft, unfortunately. Well, this is about, in the end, a huge change, a huge shift. And I went to Ethiopia recently on my mission to tackle violence against women, and met with those people there tackling FGM, which is very prevalent in those countries. And they're using different forms, working with communities to get whole communities to abandon it wholesale, which is much more productive.
I mean, do you accept that there is a responsibility in the community as well, which you are showing, I suppose, by being here, by making the film that you made?
Yeah, I think, like, asking her, who is she trying to protect, the parents or the kids? Obviously, if the parents have something to hide, they will say to you, no, we don't want our child to be examined. You want the child's safety to be first, so you should be thinking about that, not what the parents say or what they think.
Mona?
I mean, I absolutely agree. This is a child's life at the matter, and upsetting the parents. You know, you're thinking about upsetting the parents and, you know, probably insulting them. But what if this was any other form of abuse? Would you be thinking about upsetting the parents? No, you'd be thinking about the child's life first.
But do you think your generation are different? You know, and you're standing up and saying what you think in a very clear way, and that so this is a cultural practice which we will not see in the future.
Our generation is different because we were able to be we were educated. We were told, you know, the harmful effects of FGM. Which some of our great-grandparents or grandparents, they didn't have these opportunities. But schools are still not doing enough to protect these girls.
Minister, do you think it's time though for British schools, British people to assert British values? This is clearly unacceptable in this country.
Yeah,
we mustn't tiptoe around it.
No,
and
absolutely.
Got to get it sorted.
As I've said, I think that there has been far too much sensitivity and we mustn't tiptoe around it. And these girls are kind of the hope for the future. I mean, I met with Integrate Bristol only a couple of weeks ago, and they are fearsome girls. And in fact, they made a film, wasn't it? Silent Scream, was that your film? Which was truly remarkable. But you yourself said, did you not, that your whole community practically turned on you for actually having the bravery to speak out.
Are you encouraged by...
That doesn't mean they're going to give up. They're going to
No, but I'm just trying to indicate how very difficult it is if you're within the community.
But are you encouraged by what you've heard from
Great.
over here.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, I was with them. I helped them all the way I can, and I will. Yes, I am with them, and what they do is what everybody should do, not just them.
All right, we'll leave it
Starting
there.
with the government of the place.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Now, the names of Hollywood stars Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were read out alongside those from football, Wayne Rooney and Sven-Göran Eriksson. Joining them on the list was the murdered schoolgirl Millie Dowler. The otherwise unconnected roll call was that of alleged victims of phone hacking, as the Crown Prosecution Service announced that 8 people, including the former Downing Street Communications chief Andy Coulson and the former News International chief Rebecca Brooks, would be charged in connection with the hacking of voicemails. After months of police inquiries, the scandal that has opened up the dodgy practices in some newspapers and their links with political leaders will now come to trial. Peter Marshall reports.
Justice appears in